Have you ever had a really bad family vacation? Well, if they made a horror movie about it, that would be Speak No Evil. It premiered at Sundance in January 2022, and it's really, really good. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch or Pass, and today I'm going to talk to you about Speak No Evil, which premiered on January 22nd, 2022 at Sundance. It premiered on the midnight stage, so as you can imagine, it's a horror movie, and it's going to be running the festival circuit for a bit before eventually coming to Shudder in late 2022. So the film is a Danish film directed by Tafdrup, and my hot take on this film is I loved it. I thought this was a really refreshing, interesting movie. It has a lot of very subtle horror touches, and the actual buildup is just so good because it's not your kind of typical horror movie. The buildup feels very real, very kind of based in social norms. There's a few weird things that happen, but every time that happens, you can kind of explain away in some other way. And then eventually there is more of a kind of a horror side of it, but that buildup is just fantastic. And I love the characters. I love kind of how subtle the horror touches were. I thought it was a really interesting film, and it was very refreshing to watch. Now, this review is going to be spoiler-free, so I will go into the film and talk to you about a few things I liked, and one thing I was kind of neutral on. But I will do my best to not spoil. There might be one or two little things about early plot points just to kind of show the things I love. If you want to really know what happens, if you want to know the ending, look, I don't think you should, because I think this movie is a great film to watch going in blind, so you don't really know what happens. So you can enjoy the subtle dialogue and some of the interactions between the characters, because those are really kind of the meat of this film, just kind of how the characters interact and some of the things that they say that could be taken in multiple ways and could kind of be explained away. If I would recommend going in blind, but if you have to know, if you really want to know what happens, I don't know, you've already seen the film, you want to hear my thoughts, or maybe you just really need to know what happens in a horror movie before going in. I know that there's a lot of people that are like that. There are a lot of people that subscribe to my channel that are like that. So if you need to know, there is a link in this video description to the spoiler version of the review, but this review itself will be spoiler free. So this is a quick summary of the plot. So in Speak No Evil, you have a family that is vacationing in Tuscany, and while they're there, they meet this charming, fun couple that they spend some time with, have some dinners, kind of your normal like vacation friendship story. And oftentimes what happens with those is you go back to your home, your homes, you go back to your lives, and that is just a fun memory. Maybe you're Facebook friends with them, and that's about it. But in this case, that Dutch couple wrote them a letter inviting them out to visit, and they're like, hey, we had so much fun on vacation, we should all go back and see them in Holland. They make the trip, and then when they get there, things are very different. Things are very subtly different and a little overtly different at times. And what they kind of thought this couple was is very different from what this couple actually ended up being. So things I liked about this movie. The first is the story. Like I said, it was such a simple but wonderfully sinister story. Like you have this couple, they're taking this trip to Holland, and they're thinking they're going to have this fun weekend with this family that they really got along with well. But then there's all these little kind of touches that put you on edge, but also feel very relatable. Like you go to someone's house and they forget something, or they do something a little odd, and you can totally think of it as like, oh, they're just being quirky, or oh, this is just like cultural differences because we are Danish and they're Dutch. Maybe the culture is just a little bit different. But also viewed through a horror vein, you can see, oh, this is starting to become a little bit more sinister, a little more unsettling. Some weird stuff is happening. I love that. I love that the story felt very kind of relatable. Like you can totally relate to these characters not wanting to be rude or kind of writing off things that were a little weird because you don't want to make a scene. And I love that. I love that about this. And that leads right into the second thing I love, which was the subtle touches. Like the horror elements in this were not overt like in a lot of other horror movies. If you change a few things about this movie, if you change maybe the music, some of the reactions, and the ending, definitely, this could be just like a romantic comedy or like a quirky drama. Like the horror elements in this were very subtle and are kind of very nuanced. Like a lot of this stuff that happens can be written off as like, oh, well, maybe they forgot, or oh, like that was on vacation. They said something a little different on vacation, but maybe that was like a white lie. Like things like that are throughout the story. And then some of the interactions between the kids could be a little odd, but then also could just be like, oh, well, he's a quirky kid, and they explain that he has difficulty talking and he gets nervous, so that's just a little strange, but it is what it is. I love that. I love how subtle the horror was in this. There was a very, very long simmering buildup, and then there's a couple like big instances that they're not actually your like traditional horror. They're more of just like, this is an unsettling, uncomfortable thing, and they should get out. But through that, like none of this felt like your typical horror type movie. Everything was a little more nuanced, maybe a little bit more kind of downplayed for us to make this, to contribute to. But first thing I love, the story that felt very realistic and relatable. The third thing I really loved are the characters, and all this kind of goes hand in hand because the characters, again, they feel like relatable people, and especially the Dutch couple that kind of have all these strange faux pas that could just be, being rude, or could be them being a little more sinister. Like they are perfect. Like I loved both of them. They are so good at like saying things with confidence of like, oh, I didn't say that, when like they did, or like, oh, like that I just said something silly on vacation. Like especially Patrick, played by Fedja van Huêt, was so amazing. Like it was really wonderful and terrifying to see because he was so charming when he needed to be, and so kind of relatable and standoffish when he needed to be. But then when something a little bit more sinister happened, it he could turn on and become cold very quickly. And he was really, really interesting to see. And overall, just all the characters in this film, they were so well acted and they were so well written that I loved spending time with them. Like it felt like I said, it felt like a very realistic type story. And the characters, even though some fairly crazy things happened, like nothing felt supernatural, nothing felt like overt. It all felt like something that was grounded in reality, like a very twisted version of reality, but reality nonetheless. And the last thing I really loved in this film is the music and the sound, because it does a really good job of putting you on edge. There's some really great scenes where the sound will just kind of cut off, and your speakers and the scene is filled with this like blaring classical music that really does a good job of kind of like masking some of the horror, but also making you feel uneasy because it's like you can't know what's going on, but you expect something to be bad because it's a horror movie and they're playing classical music and something is happening, and it really makes you worried. It kind of puts you on edge. It gives you some tension, and I love that about this film. Like again, that kind of fits in with the subtlety that this film had. So overall, like things I liked: the story, the subtle touches, the characters, the music. Like everything is very well put together in this movie. It is a grounded horror experience. It is an interesting horror experience. It's one that kept my attention throughout, and I love just how different it also felt because it didn't have, I don't know, horror tropes is the wrong word, but it felt like something that was wholly different than some of the other horror movies I've seen. Now, things I was a little bit more neutral on, and this could be a criticism, but I actually didn't really mind it that much. There was really no explanation for the overall conclusion, like why the conclusion happened. There was no explanation, and I was a little bit kind of turned off. But then the thought more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? That actually is fine because you don't need to have an explanation. You don't need to have an explanation for why things happen. You can kind of glean some of the hints throughout the story of why these things happened. But when I thought more about it, I was like, you know what? I kind of like that there was no explanation. So that's why I put it in the more neutral side of things, because a lot of times you'll have a horror movie where they'll try to explain everything, or even not even a horror movie. A lot of movies they'll try to wrap everything up in a bow and explain the entire story to you so the audience can leave feeling like they understood everything. And sometimes that can be a little bit disappointing because the explanation is generally not as good as the buildup. And in this film, you don't have that problem. You have a really fantastic buildup, a very slow, subtle buildup, and then a big ending that feels natural given everything that you've seen, but also doesn't leave you disappointed because it doesn't try to explain away everything. So that's Speak No Evil. Like I said, it premiered at Sundance on January 22nd, 2022 on the midnight stage. But it's gonna play in a couple other festivals. You should definitely try to catch it if you can. I really liked it. I really thought it was an interesting movie. I loved kind of the layers that it had and how different and fresh it felt. But if you don't get a chance to see it, it's also going to be coming to Shudder in late 2022. Shudder seems like the perfect place for this type of film. And if you can't see it before then, you'll definitely be able to see it on Shudder late in this year. So thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. And please check out my other content. I've got other reviews. I have interviews, including an interview with Tafdrup, who shares a lot of very interesting information about the film and how he got these actors and how they film all the different scenes, and some of his and his brother's personal experiences that kind of went into this script and kind of formed some of these very realistic interactions that happened. So I love talking to Christian. I think you should definitely check it out. He was really fun to talk to. And then I also have unboxing videos and movie recommendations. Thank you so much.